Hi, I'm Liz Hicks with Liz Hicks Studios, and I want to share with you a fun way of creating your own personalized art apron. An apron that you can have fun and get messy and get paint on, get glue on, whatever, but it hides it all really well because of the layers of fabric. Now here's the example that we're going to be working on today, and you'll see the fun layers here. And what I love to do, because I have my own, is I'll actually, when I'm painting, I'll wipe my hands underneath the ruffles so that I won't get the paint on my ruffles, or even sometimes my paint just blends right in. And on top though, you'll see where I used my scan and cut to create different flowers in different shapes, and then I just did some pre-motion stitch on top. So we're going to be having a lot of fun just looking at all the different applications that scan and cut can help you create this fun art apron. As well, we're going to be using fusible webbing, which is it's a necessity for applique. So yeah, I guess let's just go ahead and get started. What we're going to be doing is creating a ruffle from about a 6-inch piece of yardage that goes from selvage to selvage edge. And with this, we're going to be creating a French seam across the sides and the bottom with just a straight stitch. And then we will be creating a basting strip across the top so that we can gather and ruffle, and then using a zigzag. Okay, so what I've done to create my French seam is I folded my fabric over and then folded it over again so that the raw edge is hidden within the seam. I am going to put my stitch at a regular straight stitch, and I'm going to make sure to stitch forward, but then I also like to do a back stitch. It's just my ingrained training of sewing with my grandmother to do the back stitch. So here is my ruffle. My ruffle's nice and pleated. It's all the raw edges are finished. All I have to do is add across the top of it a basting stitch in order to help that create that ruffle. Now if you had a ruffle foot, I'm sure you could probably do that. I don't have that. I don't have a ruffle foot, but if you were using a ruffle foot, I'd recommend, because this is a really full ruffle, this the fabric ends up being about double the size of the area you're going to be stitching your ruffle down to. So if you had a ruffle foot, I'd recommend ruffling every stitch or every other, maybe every third, but you really do want that full ruffle. Now for me, I do a back stitch. Let's do a forward stitch first, and then I do a back stitch because I need one of my corners to stay in place. Now I change my, let's go back, and I change my machine into my basting stitch, and I hit OK. Now normally I would hit my little scissor button and allow the machine to cut for me, but I need that extra thread, so I'm just going to pull probably about 12 inches and then cut it on the side. Alright, now to gather my ruffle, you'll see, remember that I had one stitch that I kept in place. This helps to make sure that I'm not just pulling my thread straight through, that one area is actually anchored. I'm going to take my top stitch of my, I'm going to take the top stitch and I'm going to pull and then pull it all the way down. And it actually works really nice and quickly if you just go gently. Alright, now I have my ruffle completely gathered. I can now stretch it out to fit the size of my apron. Okay, here's my apron. I've actually gone ahead and started with a couple different layers. And in order to make sure that each layer is even, what I did is I took a piece of chalk across, and you'll notice it here. And this tells me where my next layer is going to go. Now my next layer, being the pink layer that we just worked with, is going to go right up here. I am going to take my anchored corner and just pin it, flare it out on the bottom to make sure it stays in place. So you can see here, it's pinned in and it's flared out so that it's covering all the black. Now what I can do is easily take my ruffle and stretch it nicely across to where it will fit evenly across the entire width of my apron. Alright, to sew it, I'm taking the edge that is open, the non-anchored edge. Remember, I have one edge that has a pin in it, and I'm making sure that it's flared out. Now these loose threads here, I can actually go ahead and trim now that I don't need them, but I like to wait till the last minute to trim them just to make sure that I don't have to do any last minute altering. But since I'm stitching it down right now, this is the perfect time to trim it. Okay, let's just press down to make sure everything's in place. And we're going to change our stitch to that zigzag stitch I showed you earlier. Let's go back. Just need the basic zigzag stitch. There we go. Now I have my zigzag set to a really, really tight, small zigzag. What I'm trying to do is make sure that I get all of the raw edges so that when I throw this through the wash, I don't have to worry about the raw edges making a mess underneath. This will keep the raw edges really nice and secure in that stitch. And again, I'm just lining up. Now see here, I do have some raw edges already coming apart. I can easily just trim those as I go. Or you can trim it afterwards as well. Now I'm just guiding my edge up against my chalk. Couple things before you get started. There are 2 ties that you'll want to remember. You want to try and keep your apron straight so that you are sewing directly onto your chalk line as well. And now here we go. Okay, so now I have different pieces of fabric down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different pieces. Even this little itty bitty piece, I was able to get a flower to fit on there. And I have the same flower, and what I've done is just duplicated different shapes and sizes on these different fabrics so that I could use them for my applique. Now you'll see here on the screen there, I was able to background scan my fabric so that I can align each little flower exactly where I needed to cut. So I'll hit OK, OK, and there's my flowers. They're already again aligned with my fabric because of the background scan. I'll hit cut and start. I'm going to heat press my flowers down, and I have my iron set to a polyester setting. Now I could use a cloth over the top if you feel that would be a little bit more protective, but I have my iron set pretty low, so I'm not worried about it melting my fabric at all. Okay, now that I've appliqued down my flowers, I'm adding some free motion stitch just to make it a little bit more artistic. So here you can see just some of the free motion stitching that I did on this flower, where I just really focused on the center, and then I added some detail to the petals. I want to embellish the center, so that's why I really put a nice little focus on the center there. And now my last step is I'm going to add some permanent fabric paint to just my leaves to really give it a little bit more texture and to help fill in some of those spots that may look a little vacant. So you can see how it adds just a nice little depth to it and makes this nice kind of flower combo really come together.